Tumwater Rotary Club, and those members of our community who are World War II veterans. It's an informal program. Anybody that's here that was a veteran or involved in World War II is welcome to come up and speak to us, share your name, because we're going to film this and give it to the library. Your rank. Tell us where you were on December 7th, 1941. I suspect that's a date that if you were alive, you will never forget. Tell us what unit you were in, where you were stationed, what theaters of the war you were in, and if you feel so moved, share your memories with us. When we get done, if you're willing, we'd like the group of you who talked to us today to come up here and share a group photograph for us, or video photograph for us for the library. Long after events happen, they take on an air of the inevitability. Much has been made about the rough weather and how it happened on the landing operation in D-Days. It was really a blessing because the weather was poor. Key German officers were absent from their headquarters when the blow fell. Rommel, the most gifted of Hitler's field marshals, had taken the day off to celebrate his wife's birthday. He was with her in Ulm. 10 of his mobile panzer divisions were available to throw back at the Normandy beachhead on D-Day. And on that day, only one of them saw combat, one of the 10. Even so, it broke the British line at Caen and moved back to the beach. And that force was too small. But if only 3 of the 10 had been called out by Rommel that day, wrote H. Little Hart, the military strategist, the Allied footholds could have been dislodged before they were joined up and consolidated. It was that close in June 1944, and into that surf, and you can imagine how he felt as he saw the shoreline of occupied France getting bigger and bigger. Was George Narazani. 2 years passed. The Army of Patton just raced across Europe. The bridge at Ramadan was seized by the United States Army. And 2 atomic bombs, the only 2 that have ever been dropped, were dropped on Japan. And they promptly surrendered, at least we thought they promptly surrendered. One of our members was assigned to fly in to the recently, or about to surrender country of Japan, which no American force had been into until that moment. Americans were amazed by the docility with which the Japanese accepted defeat. It was a closer shave than they knew. Generals were reconciled to ceremonial suicide, but among younger officers, the plotting and counterplotting continued right down to August 28th, when the USS Missouri sailed into Tokyo Bay to accept the Japanese surrender, while armed Blue Jackets and the 4th Marines landed at Yokosuka, and I believe that's the correct pronunciation. Thank you, Tina. Last-ditch insurgents had sworn to massacre the landing party. And kamikaze pilots were taxiing into position at an airfield, their cockpits occupied by airmen who had sworn upon the honor of their ancestors they would dive bomb the Missouri and sink her. Admiral Nimitz was there. General MacArthur was on Missouri. Had they succeeded, the vengeance of the American people would have been terrible to withhold. But Hirohito was sending members of his family to every stronghold during that 24 hours, demanding assurance that the imperial promise would be kept. That his younger brother, the Prince, reached the strip just in time to coax the fire eaters into grounding their planes. And maybe he can share for us what that experience was. Our first person that is going to speak to us is Jim Brown.
You should have made me last. I might talk all day.
No, you won't.
I was one of those that graduated in the high school class in 1941 and immediately was thinking about getting into the service right after Pearl Harbor. I thought, well, I'd like to go in the Navy. And then I got to thinking, well, if they start firing bombs at a Navy vessel, that's not a very big object out there in the water. I better get somewhere I can move around a little bit, so I enlisted in the Air Force. And I was eventually sent down to Florida, and I was in a B-17 training outfit, and I was an engineer on the 17. I'll tell you a couple of humorous little things that happened, then I'll move somewhere else. But anyway, from overseas came the only person I probably remember in the the whole service was a Lieutenant Beverly, and I flew up with him one day on a training mission. He used to fly down into the Caribbean, or we'd fly to Baltimore and back, about an 8 or 9 hour flight on these training flights. And he said, Brown, I really like you. And he said, we're going to be flying some shooting landings in a few days, and I'd like to have you be the engineer. Well, I didn't know that this fellow was probably sent back overseas because he lost his marbles or his mind or something. But I always remember shooting landings, start in the afternoon, and then you come in and you overshoot the field, and when you overshoot, then you land anyway and put your brakes on and see if you can stop ending up in a swamp that was on the other end of the field. Then you'd come in and undershoot the landing, and maybe a couple miles short, and you'd see you weren't going to hit the strip, you'd land in the swamp again because you were short of the airfield, so you would gun it and then try to get on the strip. Well, you know, after doing that, and then we had to continue flying in the evening, where you'd come in, they'd turn the landing lights off, and you'd land with no landing lights on the field. Then they'd turn off the landing lights on the airplane. So, you know, I thought, well, I'd have a heart attack by the time we got done with this. And then we undershot the field on one landing, and then after we got back in the air again, he said, would you go back and check the tail wheels? He says, I think we hit a barbed wire fence or something, you know, back in the swamp area. So anyway, I thought I was all done with Lieutenant Beverly, but he said, I want you to go on this next flight. Well, he did two things I'll never forget. One of them is he wanted to fly with the B-17 down on the water, and he wanted to flip those sailboats over that were in between, we'll say, Miami and Cuba. And that scared me again. Then the next thing he did, he said, how slow can a B-17 fly before it stalls? I said, I don't know. I've never been involved in anything like that. So he said, well, how high can we go without oxygen? I said, well, I've never been above about 16,000 feet without oxygen. So we went to 16,000 feet. I remember he partially feathered the props, put the landing gear down, put the flaps down, and we were kind of staggering around in the air at 67 miles an hour, and the tail was going down. I said, hey, and I screamed at him. I said, hey, if we fall off on our tail, we'll never come out of a dive with even at 16,000 feet with a B-17. And so he finally speeded up, and away we went. But I got out of Florida alive. And, they sent me to the South Pacific, and I was moved into the ATC, or Air Transport Command, and I went to a lot of little islands I never heard of before, like Christmas, Canton, Johnson. I ended up in the Gilbert Islands, which is where the Tarawa, where we had our big battle. And mind you, I was not a combat person. We come in after combat, bring in supplies and all that sort of thing. And when I was on Tarawa, which is Tarawa is just a serious little atolls, little coral islands, and one of them is called Basho, where the Marines landed and had the big battle of what we call Tarawa, and we lost maybe, 2,000 men, and about 7,000 Japanese were killed. And while I was there, I ended up drawing a sketch of this little island. It's about 1.5 miles long and 200-300 yards wide, and we lived in little grass shacks on the edge of this island. And the only incident that I really made, two instances happened there. One of them was that there had been somebody, one of the men had been out in the Pacific for 3-4 years, and he kind of went off his rocks or marbles, or went insane about 2 o'clock in the morning, and he was going to kill the commander, and the commander woke up and saw him, and he got in a big battle, and the fella got loose, went running out into the ocean, and he said, well, what do we do? He says, well, the commander said, just let him go, because he was hollering he's going to swim to San Francisco. He's going home. He said, well, let him swim till he gets tired, and we'll bring him back, and we'll figure out what we're going to do. So, well, incidentally, one thing that I brought, you know, I got to thinking, I was telling my kids what we're going to do, and they said, well, Dad, you never ever mentioned about World War II, and I said, I never really thought about it. So I was telling them some of the more humorous things that happened, and I brought a couple of pictures, off of Tarawa. And but anyway, the man in the ocean. we went out and picked him up after he swam a mile or two, brought him back, but didn't have any place to put him, except in one of the pictures that shows a big Japanese pillbox had the sides bombed out, so we put him inside of that and then pushed some logs up against it, and then pushed sand up against the logs with a cap, and kept him in jail. We figured a way to get him, back to the States or something. Then from there on, see, the war was moving north towards Japan, and so the next place they sent us was Kwajalein, which is probably the only island you ever heard of out there. Les George was on this. There's some Navy people around once in a while, but there was island of Bikini where the first one of the atom bombs was fired after the war. Was on the island of Bikini, and I was there for a couple of months, or a month, and then I said, well, the war is ending. We're going to send you to Japan. Well, I thought that would be fine, and except when we flew into Japan and the war was over, and I thought, I've been in the Army put near 4 years, but I never fired a gun. And what are these people like? What's going to happen when we land on this at Atsugi Air Base? Was named just out about 20 miles out of Tokyo. And when we landed, and there was a whole lot of Japanese around it, but they were there looking for food. They were helpless. This big war machine had just starved the people in this area. They were people laying in bombed out buildings. They were starving to death that I saw. The country was in terrible shape. I often thought, well, how did they ever put together such a big war machine? But and I still beyond me, it was probably happening in the big cities. One other thing that I noticed when I was there that we had in the hillsides around this airstrip were what we called baka bombs. When some of them, they put them on the undercarriage of another plane, and they would float in on and try to blow up some of our destroyers. And they had others that were there that were one-way suicide flights, and we blew up those. One humorous thing that happened was we were there just a little while, and there was a great big safe, half the size of this room, and the American authorities wanted to get in there and get the whatever was in it, see if there's guns or munitions or dynamite stored. So blew the doors off of it, and the thing was full of money. Well, of course, we blew this money, Japanese money, all over the place. But Japanese yen was worthless. So in the evenings, we'd take that money by the waste paper basket and we'd play cards, play poker. You know how it is, your last hand of poker, and say, well, I'll push my garbage can full, you push your garbage can full into the pot. But the strange thing happened. The Army of Occupation money, we ran out of it. So they declared the yen as legal tender. So here are these garbage cans full of money, but there was about 8 inches of snow around there at that time, and there was Japanese yen in the snow, so everybody's out picking up yen in the snow, putting the lines, hanging their yen on there. But I think it was the next day that the, what they call it, CIC, CIA, or the counterintelligence, or whatever it is, they come in and picked up all the yen that we confiscated all the money. Okay, those in one of the pictures there, I took a picture from the hillside towards downtown Tokyo, and you can see it looks like a couple of miles. It just leveled, evidently by the American bombing, and plus the big firestorms that just devastated, mile after mile of Tokyo. And then, well, if you might ask me a question too a little later on what some of the other pictures are. There's one of Tarawa, I think one of Peniwetak, and but anyway, those are some of the so-called highlights. But I think those are highlights. But I'm sure everybody that's been in the service thinks about the days of being homesick. Homesick. Boy, if I could just get out of here. One last incident. I was in the Army 21 months. Said where you can go home on a furlough, and I was still in Florida. Well, I thought the fastest way to get home was if I could get a flight from Florida to San Francisco. Francisco or somewhere on the West Coast, and I did get one on a Navy fighter, except that Navy fighter went all the way to Wilmington, Delaware, and then back to Mississippi. Finally, a day or so later, got out in the middle of the desert, somewhere out of does Davis-Montcalm Air Base ring a bell with anybody? Somewhere in Arizona. We were about 100 miles short of that. I'm out in the desert, and he says, you know, I can't keep this thing up in the air anymore. But according to the map, there's an emergency air base in these mountains somewhere. So he found the air base, but it had a herd of sheep on it. And it wasn't an air base, it was just an airstrip with nobody there but the sheep and the sheep herder. So we had enough oomph in this airplane to go around it a couple times, scare the sheep out of it, so we could land. And you know, finally I got to North Island, San Diego. Then I hitchhiked from there towards San Francisco. I got north of San Francisco, somewhere up around Eureka, hitchhiking home. And this fella picked me up, had a pickup and a trailer, and had a horse on the trailer. And of all things to happen, we had a flat tire. And he says, somebody's got to ride the horse back to town and see if we can get the tire. And I said, I've never been on a horse in my life, so I stood by the car while he went back to town, got the tire patching, got it fixed. I finally got to Portland, and I got a bus and come home. Thank you.
I want you guys to introduce each other as you go along, but I know that the next person that was there was ship fitter George in Arizona.
Oh, okay.
Why don't you fix that sign up there?
Don't take a half an hour, George.
I thought maybe if you want to hear this, it would take me.
We're gonna get 5 minutes each.
How old was younger?
Busy day planned.
About 3 minutes.
It's going to take 3 minutes to read these numbers. Anyhow, I've had a number of numbers tattooed on my mind since many years ago. And the first one was 11/16/25, which is the year of my birth. And then Social Security number was 146161665, which was a Social Security number. And then my Navy serial number was 2458130. But the number that sticks out most in my mind was 6643. That was the day the day of the Normandy invasion, which was the biggest invasion in history. It was so big that it's hard for me to describe the magnitude of that of the amount of people were there. The airplanes, 10,000 airplanes in the air that day, with all the Allied combined forces. B-17s, B-24s, P-51s, P-38s, you name it. C-54s are hauling three gliders early in the morning to drop in behind the beach. And I was aboard an LST 501, which we picked up in, believe it or not, in Indiana in the latter part of 1943. Sailed down the Mississippi and got outfitted up in New Orleans and went around to New York, then up to Boston, then Nova Scotia, picked up a convoy to go to England. And there must have been about 50 or 60 ships in a convoy, and you only go, the rate of speed you go is only the rate of speed of the slow ship. So if you got a ship in there that goes 5 knots, you only go, the whole convoy only goes 5 knots. It was escorted by Canadian converted aircraft carriers and corvettes. Finally got to England, and up and down the coast we go. Day after day we go on maneuvers in and out the channel, and we had one occasion that we had about 5 LSTs got blown up by German E-boats before the invasion. But anyhow, that was things to come. So finally, when Eisenhower finally made the decision to go ahead, we was out to sea a couple of days by then anyhow with our forces aboard, and it was rough. It was rough, but by that time I felt so sorry for these GIs that came aboard. Some of them never even been aboard a ship, let alone getting over to England. A lot of them flew over from the States to England, and they were pathetic looking sights. I mean, they wouldn't care whether you slipped over the side or not when you get seasick. So anyhow, our objective that day was to go into Omaha. We had the 1st Infantry Division, and we had the 1st Infantry Division's amphibious engineers, which was self-explanatory. They go in before anybody, and they're just like the Navy SEALs. And our objective was to go into Omaha Beach, which is right in about this area. Met too much stiff resistance, so then they shifted over to Utah Beach, and which we didn't get later until the afternoon because it was by that time our rangers and amphibious engineers finally got a foothold there, and then it took quite a while to get into Omaha. And each capital ship, there was about 3,000 capital ships in the water that day between among all the Allied forces, and the characteristics of seeing an LSD or any kind of landing ship, which you have a big barrage balloon on the bow and then one on the stern. So if you could see, you probably see them for about 15, 20 miles, but if you see them coming over the horizon, you wouldn't see the ship first. You see the two big barrage balloons coming. Then later the ships would follow. But they were successful getting in there, and then we would, after we put our guys ashore, we were setting up our high and dry on the beach, and then you looking back at it, by the time the tide went out, you look back about a quarter of a mile, the tides were so low there that you could see about a quarter of a mile, and you were sitting high and dry on the beach. And then that night, during the daytimes, we had the superiority of our own planes, so the Germans didn't dare come over in the daytime, but they would come over at night, and then you'd be sitting there high and dry on the beach, and they would drop parachute flares before, and then they come make the second pass, and they could see with all these parachute flares and see what they're doing, then they would just pick the targets. But fortunately, never got hit. Anyhow, then after the invasion, we would take the wounded and the prisoners back to England, and then we would just haul the 1st and 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and 5th, and 6th Armored Division, and so that was our foothold there, and then after that, it was history. And we were dispatched to go around to through the Gibraltar up the Mediterranean, and then we made the invasion of southern France with the 3rd and 36th and 45th Infantry Divisions. And then that was a little less awesome than normally. And then if that wasn't good enough, they sent me back to the States to pick up another LST. We picked that up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, LST 1087. Sailed down the Ohio River, then down the Mississippi. Same thing, and then but then we took a route. We went through the canal, then out to the Pacific. And Jim, I think we probably took you into Japan on our LST. But anyhow, we was ready to go into the invasion, and our objective there was in Sasebo. Anyhow, so thank God for Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Grace of God, I'm still here. Thank you.
Next.
Can you put 5 years and 5 minutes in?
Sure.
With 1 o'clock. Okay?
We're all here.
4 minutes.
We're not
Huh?
going.
4 minutes.
You got plenty of
4
time.
minutes.
You got plenty of time.
I'll just pick up a few highlights, folks. You know, we were stationed guarding the San Francisco Bay Bridge. Our battery was there, and everybody was making 90-day wonders, lieutenants, you know. And I put an application in. You had to have 3 things. You had to have 128 IQ, and you had to have a letter of recommendation from your captain, and one from the lieutenant, your platoon leader. The captain gave me a nice order, a nice letter. The lieutenant told me to go to hell. Among a lot of other things, told me to go to hell. Anyway, I'm moving up another year and a half later now. I'm a company commander of a training company in Alabama. 250 men company teaching kids to kill and stay alive. Anyway, headquarters calls up and says, we're sending you a replacement platoon leader. Who walks in the door? The same lieutenant. The same one. Report of duty, sir. Okay. Wasn't too long after that, I wound up at post prison officer, 4th Story, Virginia. See, I'm skipping over a lot of years, a lot of time. And I had a real cushy job, home on the beach, and my wife and I were married at 4th Story, the chapel there. And the war was going on, everybody was getting feared, and I had up to here, so I volunteered for the Pacific. They sent me to Fort Benning for military, for jungle warfare training. Short time later, I was on a boat with 5,000 men out of San Francisco, heading for the lady. We were on the boat for for almost a month because we crossed the equator to stay out of the German U-boat area, and we came back to Lady. It got to Lady, called fate, or the right time, the right place, or the wrong time, the wrong place. Anyway, Lady, a few days before we got there, they lost a police officer in the headquarters police unit, military police unit. And I came there that day, and lo and behold, I was transferred from the infantry to the military police. There I served on 3 islands in the Pacific, and Lady, Panay, and Negros. And we were the first troops into Busan, Korea for occupation. And if any of you ever been in an outhouse with 2-holer and took a deep breath, that's how Busan was that day. Looked out over a field of thousands and thousands of humanity, no food, no water, no sanitation, nothing, and probably 5,000 people out there. Anyway, I was there for 2 months, had enough points to come home, got on a ship, landed in San Francisco. The ship was quarantined, and I got my name called over the loudspeaker, reported to the quarterdeck, and there was my dream girl, my wife, only one on the dock. Why, I don't know. I still don't know. Anyway, I walked back up to the ship, got my duffel bag and my Japanese rifles, and walked off and never turned back. One incident to the Philippines. I forget what island it was, but I was on a welcoming crew, a guiding crew for John MacArthur. I had the pleasure of meeting the man personally, and the only thing I remember, the anomaly about the thing, was all I remember about the guy, he had a corncob pipe. He was a general with a corncob pipe. Anybody mentioned MacArthur, I still remember the date. But anyway, and then to finish, we were scheduled talking about the people who derided President Truman for the bomb. I wouldn't be here, and neither would thousands of others be here, because we were loading for D-4 for the invasion of Japan, arguing. I thank you for listening. 4 minutes.
I'll make mine short if I can. I was a 90-day wonder. First, I came from the University of Washington during the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and we all expected to get our commissions in ROTC and become second lieutenants. Unfortunately, they gave the commissions to the senior class, and the junior class, which I was in, didn't get theirs. So they fooled around, let us go back to school for a couple more quarters, and which time we spent time up on the university buildings watching for Japanese fire setting, and we had a man that followed the guy that set the fires, and he put them out as fast as the lieutenant set them, but he went along, and we did all kinds of training maneuvers on the campus. We were in the quartermaster corps, and there were 60 of us, and we still meet. We met, well, about a 10-year anniversary and now a 50-year anniversary, and we still meet, and about 30 of us met at that time at the University of Washington and had a great time. After I got out of the ROTC, they sent me to Fort Francis E. Warren for an officer candidate school. I went to officer candidate school and graduated along with about 40 other University of Washington and Harvard and a bunch of other schools. And then they sent us back to University of Washington for another quarter, and I got another quarter of schooling, and then they sent me to University of Utah, and we were there for 90 days. We got one of our men in the orderly room. He made out 3-day passes for each person, so every 3 days we'd call in, and he'd okay us for another 3 days. And we spent the 90 days on pass, and we found a lady whose son had been killed, and she had a gas station. So she gave us his car and all the gas we could use, and we went all over the West during those 90 days. After we came back, we went to Oscar Candy's school at Camp Lee, Virginia, and I graduated in May of '44, which was kind of late after all, and became a second lieutenant. And then I got in the training field, and I was training what they called colored people then. Now they call them black people, to decide what the Army was going to do, whether they're going to have all black units or 50% black, 50% white, whether they're going to have educated blacks or uneducated blacks, or what they were going to do. And so we got, we trained all kinds of units to go over to Europe theater. The Army never did make up its mind what it was going to do. I guess now they still commingle them and don't work for any percentages. But anyway, we take them down to the troop ship in Virginia and put them aboard ship and pass out the rumor that there were sharks in the water, and the transports would pull out in the middle of the bay during the night, and the next day they'd come back in and finish loading and then take off for Europe. Finally, I got sent overseas. I spent some time training, picking up GIs and taking them from the East Coast to the West Coast. And then finally I got sent over as a replacement officer in the Philippines. And I got aboard a Coast Guard ship that the captain and the navigator fought openly, and the bitch box, we could hear all over the ship of them fighting. And the Dutch sea captain, who was the navigator, knew the South Sea area, and we put more lead in the floating logs in the Pacific, and you can imagine. We manned the battle stations every 5 minutes and shot the guns aboard the ship into these logs. We never did see a submarine, and we were too fast to go to get. We were too fast to go with a convoy, so they let us go by ourselves. We came into Manila after a couple of experiences in the Marshall Islands and elsewhere, where planes came down between the twin stacks on the ship and tried to fly between the twin stacks, and one didn't make it. And we standing on the deck, we could see him realizing he wasn't going to make it, and so he shoved the stick down and went into the side of the ship and killed himself. But we went on into Manila, and Manila Harbor was full of principally Japanese ships, although there was American ships sunk in the harbor. And all that was sticking out were the masts of the ships, and occasionally a bow would stick up where one ship would land on another one when it sank, and it held up the bow and be visible. Anyway, there were, I would say, pretty close to 500 ships in Manila Harbor. And I came over as a replacement officer, and I got assigned to a truck company finally, and this was rather uneventful, but I got to mention that I'm reading a book called the Rising Sun, and in it he describes each of the battles in the Pacific. And if you're interested and want to get the straight goods on what occurred in each battle, how many Japanese were in it, how many U.S. boys were lost, how many ships were sunk, all this data is in this book. You can't, living it, you got such a warped view that it was amazing. But for example, at Corregidor, the American forces the Japanese forces were taking Corregidor, and they were ready to fly a white flag to surrender to the Americans. And unfortunately, the Americans got their white flag out first, And that was how close Corregidor was. And then, of course, when they took Corregidor, they captured, I don't know, 35,000 men or something, and marched them up the Bataan Peninsula. But this book gives you all the information as to what occurred in it. I became a truck officer, and we ran convoys up to the front and brought back bodies and prisoners back to Manila. And we went from on Luzon, the full length of Luzon, up to Baguio, the summer capital, and picked them all up and brought them back to the headquarters in Manila. That's all I have.
I know I've
I
got two more
forgot one-
veterans, one from the South Seas and one from the Arctic.
I forgot one thing, the antagonism of the lieutenant towards me. Why he wouldn't let me go? The question you might, anyway, we were stationed in an auditorium. Lake Merritt was on one side of us, a beautiful hotel for women on the other side, and the lieutenant was dining and wining one of these beautiful, gorgeous redheads from the hotel, and he would take her out, and I would take her out canoeing afterwards. And one night we were canoeing after he brought her home, and you ladies know the excuse you have to give your date when you want to go with another one. Anyway, he brought her home, we went canoeing, and Lake Merritt was 2 bodies of water with a neck, kind of footbridge in between with lights over it. And they had passed the light. When we were passing that light about midnight, here comes another boat, and the single man with a gold bar on his collar. The one and the same.
Well, I'll take it. I'm the young kid. 50 years ago, with 50 pounds, I entered the service on March the 20th, 1943. I was sent, we were living in Franklin County, so all the Franklin County boys was sent to Fort Douglas, Utah, to see where we were inducted there. And from Fort Douglas, I was sent to Atlantic City, New Jersey. I was supposed to have been in the Air Force then. We were on the boardwalk, one of the hotels. The Army took over all the hotels on the boardwalk. Beautiful place to have your basic training. So I was there for about a month and shipped to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. That was a radio school. We were there about 5 to 6 months to learn your training. We also had more basic training and jungle training at Fort Monmouth. From Fort Monmouth, I was sent to Drewfield, Florida. That's down by Tampa. Now, that's supposed to have been in the Air Force then. You get in and out. I don't know how I got out of the Air Force, but I got into the Signal Corps. We were in Drewfield for about 6 months, getting the jungle training and more radio training. From Drewfield, we were shipped by troop train to Seattle. And that troop train was about 15 or 20 cars. It had all your basic utilities there. They had a cook and so on. They filled up with a bunch of games. It took us about 5 days to get from Florida to Seattle. And every time the train stopped, we'd get out and do some basic training and exercise. One place in South Carolina, I'm sure it was South Carolina, we stopped. We were there for 2 or 3 hours. And here some all of us Yankees got out and bought a bag of peanuts. And we thought we had bought a peanut for 25 cents or something. We got in the train, they weren't roasted. You had to roast peanuts before you eat them. So we learned. We were in Seattle, just for 4 or 5 days. We were shipped over in the Pacific in a convoy, about 5 or 10 ships. We could never see them. But that was the first time I really was happy I was not in the Navy. I know, I suppose you Navy boys all equated when they, in a storm, they go up like this and flap down. Boy, when they went up like that, my stomach was down also. We were on the ship about 7 days, just zigzagging like this. We landed in one place in the territory of Hawaii, which was not a state then. It was called the Red Hills. We had more jungle training there. All this jungle training, we thought we were going to be shipped out someplace. We were there for about 2 months. We looked like the Red Indian time we got out of there. So about after 2 months, we were transferred from there to Fort Shafter, which is on Oahu. And we were trained there to more radio training, and I ended there for about 2 or 3 years. And we were stationed in, we had a radio shack up on the mountain. We call it Eddie. It was all their radio shacks were built into a tunnel. You go in and out. It's about 25 feet in and another 25 feet over here. And I have pictures of them I'll pass around. We had, on Oahu, we had several blackouts. It was at night, naturally, and we were in this tunnel, and we heard out at the entrance a bunch of banging, clanging, and we thought we were being attacked. Finally, we got brave enough, and we went out there, and here was a kangaroo fighting with another kangaroo. That's as close as I got to the battle. One thing I did learn in this service, how to peel potatoes. I don't think we've all been on KP. This is Fort Monmouth. I'll pass them around. One thing, you get educated. I learned how to peel potatoes, how to carry a gun, how to tune in a radio. Here's a little I found in my memories about troop ships. Tell you all about, the troop train. We took it from Troopville, and it explains it very well what a troop train is and what they're packed with. There's a picture of all of us young kids, about 19 years old, when we hit the Red Hills. You can see what we look like and 50 out of there a hole. This is our radio shack. Big thing I think we all enjoyed was when the wars were over. Right? I feel I was one group. The service all ran by numbers. You're all aware of that. I feel I was a lucky number where I landed and I came home. Remember this? Stars and Stripes?
Yep.
This is Pacific Ocean area edition. All these are passed. This is a young soldier, 19 years old. Our tunnel, our radio shack tunnel, which was called, overlooked Hickam Field. We're way on top. This shows some of the pictures. We had to drive up in a truck to the tunnel and then walk the rest of the way. I looked at, went through my, we got a lot of pictures, went through and bring back a lot of memories. Here you can see Hickam Field here. You know, one thing about here, you don't have the Pacific station here.
That's right under your thumb.
How about Pearl Harbor?
It's right there.
That's what started it. Here's the the entrance to our tunnel. Here's the evacuation part. Those who wish to look at them will just throw them in here. There's a lot to look at. back 50 years ago, early memories. You take a kid out of high school, throw him into the Army, you don't know what to expect. But I covered it from Spokane to New Jersey and back twice while I was in the service. I was very lucky I didn't have to go through your battle.
I wasn't in any battle.
There were 20 of us in our high school, and all the boys went to the service and all the boys came back. That was a pretty good miracle.
Can we pass some of those around? There's one more. There's one more.
One more?
What battle did you pick up that
All
team?
these guys, the big guys, some of these laying up 1.5 an hour. And Jim Brown takes 25 minutes. It's dumb.
Really, this knee is from Fort Benning. That's the first time they injured me. So, I'm one of the kids. I was drafted. I don't know if any of the rest of you people were or not. I graduated from high school in '44 and went to WSU and had a medical problem, and then was drafted at Fort Lewis the last week that they happened to draft people into the service. I was accepted in veterinary school at the same time, but I couldn't go because I didn't start for another week. So I ended up and went to Fort McClellan, Alabama. It took us 5 days to get to Fort McClellan, Alabama on a very slow train. From there I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, and took my airborne training. And I was one scared kid. I'm telling you. Any of you fellas been to Fort Benning? Somebody was. You know where those jump towers are? How big they are? 330 feet up in the air. And I was on the second lift that day that we had tower exercises. And the guys that went up before us, they only jumped 3 wings on a tower. And they were just jumping 2 towers, I think, because of the way the wind goes. These things go up in the air and they have big arms that sit out. And they bring you up on a cable. Your chute is in a big rim and it goes up, and 6 feet from the top the blooming thing stops. And they wait to get all 3 people up there, and then they press the button and they all go up and everybody goes down at once. Well, the first group, 2 of them didn't slip their chutes quite right, and they were playing, I guess. One of them just about hit the tower, so I was on the way up and they stopped me, and the sergeant, the lieutenant, and the captain all got busy chewing, you know where, on these particular boys, because the week before, 2 guys had been killed on the tower going into it, and they were real upset, very nervous. So after that, and after graduation from that, I was selected along with another fellow to go to stand out, and I was selected by the 87th, I think it was the 87th Airborne Wing was at Fort Benning. They were the elitists, and they went to Washington, D.C. They were the guys that dressed up in the white scarves and all the rest of that stuff. And I was selected along with another fellow, and the colonel came up and talked to us. He said, well, I want you to go to OCS, and I want you to join my outfit. And I said, sorry, I want to go back to school. And the colonel said, did you hear what I said? And he says, I'm going to send you to OCS. And he said, but you have to sign up for 4 years. And I want you to be an officer in my outfit. And I says, I'm going back to veterinary school. And he's a dumb farm kid. You know, he was told by his folk this was what he thought. He got in his car and slammed the door. And the captain came up and says, you don't tell a colonel no. I said, well, I told you what I thought. That's when they lost my records. So there I was. Don't take, when you read about somebody's records getting lost, it's true. Well, I stayed in the same barracks, and there was quite a interval there before the next class came in, because they were starting to wind this training down. In fact, I found out on graduation, the guy said, "What the Sam place is you doing in here?" He said, "Draftees don't belong in the paratroops anymore." I said, "Well, here I am." So finally, I wouldn't leave the barracks, and they tried to kick me out, and I went to the company commander, and I said, "Well, this is the last place I was assigned. I'm not gonna leave it, because I don't know where to go." And the sergeant, he said, "Give you all the passes you want." And I found out, yeah, you would, for $5 every time you want a pass, you'd get one. Anyway, they finally found to get rid of me, and I went to Camp Stoneman. At Camp Stoneman, I was just about ready to get on the boat. I was assigned to the 11th Airborne in Japan, and they said, "Hey, draftee's got to be out of the service." Okay, that's fine, I wasn't supposed to be in anyway. So, in 19, oh, it's 46, 47, they kicked me out, unfortunately. But I didn't see any, I wasn't in during any of the shooting and combat. But that's all of it in short story.
I failed to mention one thing. We were a signal air warning division. What I mean by signal air, our radio shop picked up all the radar notices, and we got a buoy with the end, and we called the airport. SAW outfit.
I know I have one.
Moving right for you, Charlie.
All right.
Geez, we had this many, why did you talk to 25 minutes instead of 25 minutes?
I hadn't planned on making any speech. I didn't take any notes, but I feel as though I would be remiss if I didn't tell you people how the Arctic regions of Alaska and Canada fitted into the war effort. My name is Charlie Hannes. I was born on a small subsistence farm in Pennsylvania. Along come the big war. I joined the Air Force and the Air Weather Squadron. After a few technical schools, I was sent to Orlando, Florida. And then after a month or so, I realized what was happening. All the weathermen in Orlando, Florida were being sent to the jungle. Snakes are something that I didn't like then, I don't like now, and I never will. So I was looking for a way out. Along comes a little slip for volunteers for Arctic duty. CH went on there right now. A month later, I was sent up to Wisconsin for Arctic weather training, 3 months of that. Then I found myself up in Frobisher Bay, myself and 6 other weathermen. Now see, we had, during that time of the war, all the shipping was being sunk by, or most of it, was being sunk by submarines, so they had to find another route. And the route they had for P-51s was from Presque Isle, Maine, to Goose Bay, Labrador, Gander, Newfoundland, across the strait to Frobisher Bay. Frobisher Bay is where the hell it gone up north there, in the Northwest Pacific, of the Northwest Territories of Canada. There's a bay. 6 of us ended up there with a C-47, little prefab hut. We set that thing up. We had our equipment there to set up our weather station, and that was the purpose of it. See, to set up a weather station, take weather observations, and do forecasts. And we were setting up, testing the atmosphere from the surface to 120,000 feet by means of a balloon filled with hydrogen that we generated. We had a little radio sound box. We knew it would go up 1,000 feet a minute. And then they could give us the weather from the surface to 120,000 feet. And our job was to brief the people that would come up with these P-51s. These were all short range, you know. And they would come on up there, get refueled, and come in for a forecast, and then go from Frobisher Bay to Greenland to Iceland to Preston in England. That was the one route. They had 2 routes, one on the western side, and I'll tell you about that a little bit later. Well, Frobisher Bay, I could describe in just one little sentence. There's just miles and miles and miles of nothing and nothing. short tempers, all of them. Well, we happen to have one forecaster that stuttered, and he was okay as long as you didn't get him excited. And on this particular day, along comes this general, and he's got his P-51, they're always in a hurry, and he wanted a forecast for Greenland, Bravo, and the rest of it. Well, the forecaster is there, he's got the forecast, he knows what to say, the just wouldn't come out. And then the general gets mad, and he says, well, hurry up, Sergeant, and he says, I'm in a hurry. And the sergeant just looks at him, and nothing would come out. Finally, he says, for Christ's sakes, Colonel. And that was it. And this other fellow that was there went in there and took care of it for him. I was there for 2.5 years, and came out, and I went to Great Falls. I got bored there too, and I was looking for a way of going. But that time, I liked the Arctic. I liked the culture of the Eskimos, the natives, and all. Now in Great Falls, along comes a request for volunteers for Arctic duty in Alaska. So I volunteered for that, and I found myself up in Edmonton for a while, and then in Fairbanks. See, that was the other route for shipping, the ones that went to Russia. They would go from Great Falls to Edmonton, to Fairbanks, across the strait, and into Siberia. See, and then in Fairbanks, the Russians had a big hangar there too. And I could speak Ukrainian, see, and then I got friendly with these Russians, and some of the Russians there could understand Ukrainian, but that's part of it anyway. And of course, I didn't know that the FBI and the other people of the counterintelligence was watching me, see, because here I can speak the language, I could talk to them, and who is this guy? Well, they did a pretty good job of researching me, because they even went to my mother way back there in Pennsylvania. Checked on her that I found out later on. But anyway, when I found out, see, they got me in all the generals and all, in the big room at one time. Everybody was querying me. If you've ever been investigated by the FBI and counterintelligence and the military, you know what it's like. You're right in the middle of the room, right there by yourself, and you got questions coming from every direction. So here I am, a young kid there, 19 years old, with I was sweating. What did I do wrong? I didn't know what they were after. Well, after it was all over, that one major says, "Well, have you guys finished?" And I says, "Yeah." And none of them had any expression on their faces at all. They said, "Sergeant, you're excused." So I walked out of it. I didn't know what was what. Finally, the major called me up and told me what was done. My experience in Alaska was in Fairbanks and in Nome, and there we had to serve the weather reports for the Aleutian campaign as well. And the interesting part about that is to see that here at this very club, the one general that we served that would come into our office for weather reports had come to our club right here twice. Fred Cook invited the general and myself out for lunch. And we thought then how small this world is. His name is Ronald McDonald. And he's been here twice. And the other strange thing is that his son lives right next to me at the Sten Village. That's it.
Have anybody else that wants to come forward? I know there's other veterans. Could I have the group of you come back up just for one still photograph or one photograph that will take off the video?
Come on, Joe.
Picture time.
Picture what?
Photo time.
No, you get,
Prosperity.
You Rotarians don't have
Posterity.
a hero. We have a hero right here in our Twanian.
Hey,
Walt,
man.
the day before D-Day, got pulled out of his unit, he says, so he could teach golf and
Looks like
fly.
we all came.
Good teaching golf.
hey, thanks very much.
As always. Oh, you know, over there, over there. Spanish.
Hey,
Ken.
Well, we all came back in one piece, fellas.
Amen.
Well, let's close the meeting up here real quick, like, we're gonna have a drawing.